Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, the show that brings you headlines, controversies and perspectives of the week. New Delhi has dismissed a two-part documentary of the BBC as propaganda against our country. But why is the BBC trying to stoke fires that have been put to rest is the question. We will try to understand this in detail. But first up, what were the other headlines of the week? Laying out the roadmap for the 2024 challenge, Prime Minister Narendra Modi directed senior BJP leaders to go out to the people, especially the marginalized and minorities. He reiterated that government benefits must reach the last citizen in the queue. PM Modi was addressing the National Executive Meet of the BJP held this week. The executive also decided to extend the term of party president JP Nadda till June 2024. In a major push to employment, Prime Minister Modi has given out 71,000 odd appointment letters to the eligible candidates across the country. This was the third tranche of Rozgar Mela kicked off last year and the first one this year. The appointments span across several ministries and departments like earlier. The poll season for 2023 is all set to kick off, with the Election Commission announcing the dates for the states of Tripura, Nagaland and Meghalaya. While Tripura will vote on February 16th, Nagaland and Meghalaya dates are February 27th. The results are slated for the 2nd of March. Abdul Rahman Makki, considered number 2 in the Lashkar-e-Taiba and a close relative of Hafiz Saeed, has been designated a global terrorist by the UNSC. Makki has been on the radar for years, pushing terrorism in India and other parts. Efforts to designate him succeeded after China lifted its veto, which had become a major impediment at the time of earlier such moves. Viewers, a two-part documentary series by the British Broadcasting Corporation has attempted to put India in the dock over its treatment of minorities. Not just that, the BBC series tries to raise questions on Narendra Modi's record in Gujarat during 2002. The question here is, why is the BBC wanting to stoke fires which have been put to rest by the judiciary squarely after the due process of law? So, to deal with this question and understand the intricacies involved, I have a power-packed panel here with me this evening. Joining me on Media Scan, Anil Trigunayat, well-known diplomat, author, has represented India in various parts of the world during his career. You have heard him on Media Scan on earlier occasions. Welcome back, Anil Trigunayat. Great to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you so much.
And joining me for the first time on this show, Desh Ratan Nigam, a lawyer by profession but an analyst on public affairs. Great to have you, Desh Ratan Nigam, on Media Scan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Smita.
And Mr. Nigam, my first question also comes to you. I am sure, like us, you too have been following the developments over this series being aired by the BBC. One episode has been shown, the other is due very soon. Since the issues raised in the BBC series have gone through a long drawn process of law, and the court has very categorically put a rest on any further issue or controversy on the matter, I want to understand from you, sir, do you think, for whatever reasons, the BBC is trying to act as judge, jury and executioner, and why?
Well, Smita, in fact, certain section of the United Kingdom still suffers from colonial hangover. They've not been able to get over with that, and recently India went past ahead of United Kingdom, becoming the 5th largest economy and Britain becoming the 6th largest economy.
Yes.
And therefore, this issue was also addressed by Dadabhai Naoroji, that the colonial hangover and the hate towards India has always been there since pre-colonial times and colonial times, and certainly, even post-independence also. And that colonialism, Indians, and there were certain set of people in India which were also suffering from colonial hangover. And if you recall, Prime Minister Modi from the ramparts of Red Fort this year clearly
Yes.
said we have to get out of that colonial hangover and mindset. And this is where the difference arises. And BBC has always been anti-India, anti-Hindu. However, nowadays, since 2014 and 2002, afterwards, they have become anti-Modi as well. And they cannot distinguish where they become anti-Modi and anti-Hindu, anti-India. All seems to be getting mixed up with this thing. In fact, their newly appointed chief, Tim Davie, in 2020 said, clearly admitted there are problems in BBC. There is a leftist lobby which dominates it and he wants to rectify that. But it seems he has failed. And the problem arises also. I can give you a number of instances. Before the elections in 2019, they again started their anti-Modi and anti-India rhetoric. And now 2024 elections are coming up. And again, they have started to ratchet up the same controversy, which has been settled fair and square based on all evidence, record, witnesses by the Supreme Court. And let me give you an example. The first report on the 2002 burning of the bogie,
Godhra
in
train.
which the 58 car civics were roasted alive, was given by Railway Protection Force on February 27 itself.
Yes.
When they said this bogie was attacked from outside and the petrol was sprinkled and the rags were thrown inside and the doors were bolted from outside. Then we had the Nanavati Mehta Commission, which gave a clear categorical finding on Prime Minister Modi and gave a clean chit to him and also gave a clean chit to the role of the state and the ministers and the police officials. They did all they could. In fact, the then Chief Minister, Mr. Modi, requested the neighboring states to provide them force. That was refused.
In fact, Mr. Nigam, from the trial to the apex court level, it is difficult to keep count of how many petitions, curative petitions, review petitions, and various affidavits and cases have been filed and the court has gone into them so thoroughly. It must be one of the biggest cases of the world as far as the judiciary is concerned.
Allow me to add here.
Ji.
The SIT, which was created by the Supreme Court, had central government officials and the director of CBI, Mr. Raghavan, was heading it.
Yes.
And it went deeply into it. It, went into more than 40,000 documents, 1,000 witnesses, statements and everything, and gave a clean chit to Mr. Modi and the state government. And this SIT was monitored by the Supreme Court, and the officials of the SIT were under the control of the then Congress UPA government, and they gave a clean chit. And Supreme Court, after going through the entire record, found everything in order, gave a clean chit to Mr. Modi and dismissed all the petitions. And
yes, of course.
In fact, politicians like Mr. Lalu Yadav tried to give a political color to it because of Bihar elections.
That
committee was also rejected by the Supreme Court.
In the end, the Supreme Court had to make it very clear that, look, we have gone into everything and this will be the last of the matter on this issue. The long and short of it being that there has been no tool, no option within the judiciary that has not been tried. And now that finally the chapter has come to a close, why would the BBC want to do any such exercise which tries to bring back the pain, the suffering and the same old controversies? Coming to Anil Trigunath, Mr. Trigunath, you have been a serving diplomat. You understand the intricacies of foreign affairs better than any of us, sir. Why do you think the BBC would go into such an exercise, and at this point of time exactly?
Well, let me just tell you, Sudhaji, that I used to be in New York and also in Russia when I was handling media. So in the US, we had the visits, India was economic reforms and everything was going on. So when the Indian Prime Minister came there, and the visit was totally unnoticed. So I asked the media fellows, especially from New York Times and others, and they said, good news is no news. And you are just sending us these news. Everybody comes here, doesn't make any news to us. So what they need is, news means some friction. So that's what they need. Now, BBC, as you know, has been a British Broadcasting Corporation, has completed 100 years of this kind of reporting. As far as India or other good news about India is concerned, you will find very rarely some good mentions of India or in the Western media. And
but sir, it is one thing to focus on the negative side of news or to raise controversies.
Yeah.
This here is a very sensitive subject, sir. It has communal overtones.
This is what I'm saying. I said this now that they have seen that Nigam Saab ne bhi bola that, you see, India has recently surpassed the UK. So that is one. Then you have virtually a Hindu prime minister, even if it's a British, but he does have. And the question asked was by Mr. Hussain, who is an MP there, again a rabid fundamentalist.
Yes.
So I find that this is a stoking these kind of things, controversy, which do not exist. So that's what they're trying to probably just do, that's to create sensationalism and to get some kind of a PRP ratings for the British. That is one thing, but which is abominable in my view. And I think that we cannot ignore this fact that they cannot take the fact that India has not only done what they're doing, but under Prime Minister Modi, kind of heft, kind of global leadership that has been, that has come about in India, and India is going ahead and is acceptable all over the world. That is not acceptable to a very large part of these kind of doubters. And so they want to create mischief in India, and the elections are coming. So obviously they want to create controversies. And that's the reason that all this has happened. So I think it is because of the BBC, which has always had this negative slant as far as India is concerned, and that colonial mindset, we can call it, or we can just call it that they just are unable to grasp the fact that India has become so...
So allow me to put a query here. It is one thing to understand that, India's rising heft, as you just mentioned, our global standing, particularly in the last 2-3 years during COVID and post-COVID period, may be a little unpalatable to a section of the Western media, the Western intelligentsia. However, isn't this going too far by stoking fires of communal feelings? Because we know, sir, that for the longest time possible, Indian cities, Indian villages had gone through a lot of political violence and communal. It is only now that we see that things have settled down and the youngsters of the country are looking up to raise the country standing at the global level and not focus on these divisive issues.
But Smitaji, let us not forget, these were the British who divided India on the communal lines.
Yes.
And they are very largely responsible for creating the communal discord within India. I mean, so that's a history, and we know it. And that's how divide and rule was their policy, which they followed all through. And now they are trying to create, because see, what I'm saying is that now they can't find anything else. So they just want to talk about the communal discord, or that says BJP is a Hindus party. So they want to just show that there is a problem as far as the Muslims are concerned or minorities are concerned, and trying to just pick and choose certain areas. Now they know they have not gone through, as so clearly you and Mr. Nigam mentioned about, that the legal process in India, if that country is run by a rule of law, they should respect the rule of law rather than sensationalism.
Point taken. Deshratan Nigam, do you agree that it was the British initially who tried to bring in communal divisions in the country, and now that the country seems to be progressing despite so many challenges, including health challenges, they are unable to, it is unpalatable for them that India is rising while they are sort of getting into a rut?
Yes, absolutely, Smitaji. The divide and rule was the most famous policy that the British employed. And the creation of Pakistan was a manifestation of that policy. And also because the British and the West wanted their stooge on India's western border so that they can keep track of Russia at that point of time. There seems to be rattle because of Prime Minister Modi's popularity, because he is the most popular leader in the world today with more than 70% approval rating. Joe Biden is somewhere about 40%. And let me give you some
And Mr.
facts.
Modi's popularity ratings, unlike many other world leaders, remains consistent. It has never been going up or down.
It is going, in fact, upwards.
Upwards.
Upwards. And let me give you a few facts where the British seems to be rattled. And let me tell you one thing before I give you the facts is that the BBC is harming the national interest of both India and United Kingdom. Because Rishi Sunak is also the Prime Minister there, the issue of free trade is also pending, and these are the factors which may harm the interest, because UK today is behind in many parameters if you compare it with India, if inflation is there and so many factors. So therefore, it is in both the countries' interest that the organizations like BBC are kept under check, and they should be allowed to report true facts, not peddle fake narrative, which they do, and which I actually allow me to speak it and forgive me for that. This is gutter journalism, and they should be prevented from doing that. And let me give you a few facts. India's GDP rank moved from 10th to 5th position from 2014 to 2019. Share in global GDP raised from 2.6 to 3.2% recently, and share in global trade rising from 2 to 2.2%. Share in FDI flows 2.1% to 6.7%. And look at India today is the second largest steel producer and the highest
milk
and sugar producer.
When the world is battling the worst economic challenges, India stands out like a beacon of hope. That is what most of the rating agencies are repeatedly saying.
Yes, absolutely. Where the United Nations, IMF and World Bank says India is the only shining example and hope for the world. Yes. Where the world is under recession, India's projection at the minimum has been pegged at 6.5%. So India is marching. India is trying to be a Vishwaguru, which is not a muscular concept of the West during the Cold War. It is a concept of India being friend, philosopher and guide to the world. And also, if you recall, India, when the West refused to give vaccines to the countries, India gave free vaccines to the world, more than 100 plus countries. So the entire lobby is rattled. They don't want India to go ahead because India believes in the balance of powers. It does not believe in, muscular supremacy. And that is where their age-old concepts are crumbling, and the other countries are closely watching India also and the other Western countries, and they are comparing. On one hand, India takes care of the world. Recently, Guyana's Prime Minister said when the world dished them, India stood with them during pandemic.
Allow me to bring in Anil Trigunath also into the discussion, sir. Mr. Trigunath, Rishi Sunak, as you also mentioned, cut down one of the British members of Parliament of Pakistani origin, incidentally, who wanted to raise this issue on the floor of their house, and he very clearly said that he does not at all agree with the characterization that is being put forth. Meanwhile, our External Affairs Ministry has also made it very clear that such propaganda and the effort to push a very dangerous agenda will not be tolerated at all. However, the fact remains, sir, that media agencies, the BBC included, have been doing it not just this time but many times in the past, whether you look at their role during the Leicester violence in the UK or earlier when COVID happened. We have had our own experience in the Prasar Bharati when they misquoted one of our figures to put the entire Indian broadcasting in a very negative light. The larger question remains, governments may react and they will do their job. India and UK governments are having the best of their relations. But how do we stop these games being played, which certainly try to derail the agenda?
Well, Smitaji, I think that when you talk of democracy, there the media is said to be the fourth estate.
Yes, sir.
And it is supposed to have that kind of responsibility that the other three do have. And so India does not believe, or we do not believe in it. And I think the British who really founded all these principles should be able to find a self-regulation of this kind of thing. This is the least expected from the BBC under the current times. But since, as we mentioned, both of us have mentioned about the various issues because of which they would have done it, because of the sagging ratings of the BBC as it is. I mean, I have not watched BBC in last 1 year, frankly, because of the kind of news they peddle. But at the same time, I know that this is something that has to be a self-regulation. I would not recommend that any kind of a cutting down on the media freedom, because media does play an important role. But these kind of things that happen, they are to be taken very seriously by the British government themselves. If they wish to, and they really value the friendship with India, as Prime Minister Sunak.
On a practical note, sir, on a practical note, I can understand this within the country. At a global level, how is it possible to advocate and push for self-regulation?
Well, I think it should come from the media. The moment any government will try to do anything, this is media which will go after them all through, in India or abroad, anywhere else. I mean, we have the freest media in many ways. Yes. But I would say, I mean, you see, unless you frame a law or constitutional reforms or some kind of a thing that will not allow the kind of news that that imperils the bilateral ties between the two countries, I mean, it can be stopped from that being broadcast, that kind of documentary, if the British government thinks like that. So I think, in my view,
yes,
a very, one has to be pragmatic about these things, because this is how the media is really thriving today, whether it is the social media domain, by sensationalizing stories. And then you are there to defend it or to counter it over time. I mean, that's how I see it growing, unfortunately.
I will come to Deshratan Nigam quickly here. Mr. Nigam, in the past, as I was just saying, some months back we had these unfortunate violent incidents in some cities and suburbs of the UK, popularly called the Leicester violence, referred to as Leicester violence. The Indians there, for example, I have statements from the Insight UK and other such citizens bodies. They have very, very strongly questioned the role played by the BBC, which tried to paint the Hindu population in these UK cities to be responsible and laid completely false accusations on them. Earlier too, in the past, whether it was during the very difficult times of COVID, or once when there was a statement in Parliament regarding the budgets of the Prasar Bharati, these are just a few of the many dozens of incidents where the BBC has been known to completely peddle fake news and not even apologize.
Smita ji, before I answer your question, let me add a few things to what Anil ji said.
Yes.
Because since this broadcast has been seen in India as well, both in terms of contempt of Supreme Court and also defamation, criminal defamation, and they can be brought to book in India. And secondly, I am sure British Parliament is aware of the fake news that is being peddled by BBC. The fact remains, when self-regulation does not work, we require parliamentary oversight and reach to take control of this fake narrative that they are trying to build against India. And therefore, it is very, very important to curb this, stop it once for all. Second, the diplomatic pressure can also be brought about. And once you talk about these things happening, how can it be stopped? We need to find a solution.
So you are of the opinion that self-regulation is the ideal situation, but when it doesn't work, it is time to go for legal remedies and diplomatic pressure. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, certainly. Because, otherwise these things will continue. On one hand, we have a prime minister who's working so hard to take this country at the highest level in the world, and the world is giving due recognition to India. Then you have the old remnants of the colonial Raj like BBC, which are trying to give an absolutely different picture based on, not at all facts, rather fake news, worse than fake news, and trying to create
Point taken,
tension.
sir. Point taken. Just 30 seconds, because I have completely run out of time on the show. Anil Trigunayat, is it time to go for some legal action or at least greater diplomatic pressure? Statements may not be enough.
Definitely, diplomatic pressure has to be there. I mean, I'm sure our High Commission would be working on it. At the same time, wherever we feel that there is, as Mr. Nigam said, we need to go in for the legal remedies wherever it is, and this BBC should be penalized for that. And
Absolutely,
I think we have agreements whereby our whatever our courts say will be carried out in the UK as well.
Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for explaining the background, the nitty-gritties of the situation, and also what countries like India and our governments can do in similar situations. Thank you very much to Deshratan Nigam, who found the time to join us for the first time. But we will come back to you in some other episode. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Anil Trigunayat, you have always been very kind to join us whenever we have requested you. It was great to understand and decipher the problem with your help, your perspective, sir. Thanks again.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
As we have flagged in this program many times, self-regulation remains the best way out for the media, not only in this country but globally. However, when so-called reputed agencies of the world do not stick to the maxim, perhaps it is time for stronger remedies. And this is what both our experts have tried to highlight today. On that very serious note, it is time to bring an end to this episode of Media Scan with the promise that we will be back next weekend with another important topic. Till then, wishing all our viewers a happy Republic Day. Namaskar.